Have you ever had that moment where you catch your reflection in a window and for a split second you don't recognize yourself? Not your face, but the person behind it. Like you're looking at a stranger wearing your clothes, living your life, making your choices, and you wonder, when did I become this? Is this actually me? Or is this just who I learned to be? Most people walk around their entire lives without asking that question. They wake up, go to work, scroll, sleep, repeat. And somewhere along the way, they forget to check in. They forget to ask, am I living my life? Or am I living the life I was told to live? Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Most of what you think is you isn't actually you. It's a collection of other people's voices. Your parents' expectations, your teacher's judgments, your friends' opinions, society's rules about who you should be and how you should behave. And over time, you've absorbed all of that so deeply that you can't tell the difference anymore between what you genuinely want and what you were trained to want, between who you are and who you're performing. There was this thinker, Carl Jung, who spent his life trying to understand why people feel so disconnected from themselves. And he came to this realization that most of us are walking around wearing masks. Not literal masks, psychological ones. He called it the persona, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. You need a persona to function in the world. You can't just show up to a job interview as your raw, unfiltered self and expect things to go well. You need some level of performance, some level of adaptation. But here's where it gets dangerous. Most people don't just wear the mask when they need to. They start to believe the mask is who they are. They forget it's removable, and eventually they can't take it off even when they're alone. Think about it. How often are you actually yourself? Like, genuinely yourself, with no filter, no performance, no concern about how you're being perceived? Maybe never. Maybe only in the shower or late at night when no one's watching. And even then, there's probably a voice in your head monitoring you, judging you, telling you what you should be thinking or feeling. That voice, that's the mask talking. That's the persona you've built to survive in a world that doesn't always reward authenticity. But here's the part most people avoid. If the persona is everything you show the world, then what's underneath? What are you hiding? Jung called it the shadow. Everything you've rejected about yourself, everything you've deemed unacceptable, your anger, your selfishness, your desires that don't fit the image you've created, your fears, your weaknesses, your vulnerabilities, all the parts of you that you've shoved down because you were taught they were bad or wrong or shameful. And most people spend their entire lives running from their shadow, pretending it doesn't exist, because looking at it feels too uncomfortable, too dangerous, too much like admitting you're not the person you've been pretending to be. But here's where it gets uncomfortable. You can't run from your shadow forever. Because the more you ignore it, the stronger it gets. It starts showing up in weird ways. You project it onto other people. The things you hate most about others, usually the things you've rejected in yourself. You sabotage yourself. You make decisions that go against your own interests, and you don't even know why. You have these moments of rage or sadness or self-destruction that seem to come out of nowhere, but they're not coming from nowhere. They're coming from the parts of you that you've been ignoring. The parts that are screaming for attention. Jung believed that real psychological growth doesn't come from eliminating the shadow. It comes from integrating it, from looking at all the parts of yourself you've rejected and saying, okay, this is also me. Not in a destructive way, not in a now I get to be a terrible person way, but in an honest way. In a I'm more complex than I've been allowing myself to be way. Because you can't be whole if you're constantly at war with yourself. If you're constantly trying to cut away the parts that don't fit the image, wholeness means accepting all of it. The light and the dark, the strengths and the weaknesses, the things you're proud of and the things you'd rather forget. He called this process individuation, becoming yourself, your whole self, not the self you were told to be, not the self that gets approval, but the self that's actually real. And it's a lifelong process. It's not something you achieve and then you're done. It's something you commit to, again and again. Every time you notice you're performing instead of being, Every time you catch yourself hiding something true to maintain an image, every time you feel that disconnect between who you are and who you're pretending to be. But here's the thing. Most people never start this process because it's uncomfortable, really uncomfortable. It means facing parts of yourself you've spent years avoiding. It means admitting you've been lying to yourself. It means potentially disappointing people who like the version of you you've been performing. It means uncertainty, because if you're not the person you thought you were, then who are you? And that question terrifies people. So instead they distract themselves. They stay busy, they scroll, they consume, they perform, anything to avoid that quiet moment where they'd have to actually face themselves. And this is where things quietly fall apart, because you can avoid yourself for a while, but eventually the disconnection catches up with you. You wake up one day and realize you don't know what you actually want. You've been living someone else's life, following someone else's script, and you feel empty. Not depressed, exactly, just hollow. Like you're going through the motions, but there's no one home. And you start to wonder, is this it? Is this what life is? Just performing until you die? Jung would say no. He'd say life actually begins when you stop performing and start discovering. When you stop trying to be who you should be and start exploring who you actually are. But that requires something most people aren't willing to do. It requires going into the unknown, into the parts of yourself you've been avoiding. And it requires letting go of the certainty that comes with having a fixed identity. Because here's what nobody tells you. The self isn't fixed. It's not some solid thing you find and then you're done. It's fluid. It changes. It evolves. You're not the same person you were 10 years ago, or even last year, or even yesterday. You're constantly becoming. And the more you try to lock yourself into a fixed identity, the more you suffer. Because you're trying to hold still something that's meant to move. Jung talked about something he called archetypes, these universal patterns that exist in all human psyches. Not because we learn them, but because they're built into us. The hero, the shadow, the wise old man, the mother, these patterns that show up in every culture, every story, every dream, and they show up in your life too. Sometimes you're the hero trying to overcome something. Sometimes you're the shadow, acting out your rejected parts. Sometimes you're the trickster, disrupting your own plans. These aren't separate people. They're different aspects of you, different energies that emerge depending on what's happening in your life. And one of the most important ones is what Jung called the Anima and Animus. For men, the anima is the hidden feminine energy. For women, the animus is the hidden masculine energy. And most people reject these parts of themselves because they don't fit the gender roles they were taught. Men suppress their sensitivity, their emotionality, their receptivity. Women suppress their assertiveness, their anger, their ambition. And then they wonder why they feel incomplete. Why relationships feel so difficult, why they keep looking for something outside themselves to make them whole. But the wholeness isn't outside, it's inside. It's integrating all the parts of yourself you've been taught to reject. So what does this actually look like? How do you start finding yourself? Jung would say, pay attention to your dreams. They're messages from your unconscious. From the parts of yourself that don't get a voice during the day, pay attention to what you're drawn to. What makes you come alive? What you do when no one's watching and there's no reward? Pay attention to what you judge in others. Because that's usually pointing to something in yourself you've rejected. Pay attention to the patterns in your life. The same conflicts, the same types of people, the same self-sabotage. Those aren't coincidences. Those are your unconscious trying to get your attention, trying to show you something you need to see. And here's what changes everything. The ego thinks it's in control. It thinks it's running the show, but it's not. The ego is just a small part of who you are. It's the part that creates separation, that says, I am this and I am not that, that builds walls and defends territory and maintains the image. But beneath the ego is something bigger. Jung called it the self. With a capital S, the totality of who you are, conscious and unconscious, light and shadow, all of it. And the journey isn't about strengthening the ego. It's about surrendering to the self, letting go of the need to control everything, letting go of the fixed identity and trusting the process of becoming. I don't fully understand this myself. Some days I feel like I'm making progress. Other days I feel completely lost, like I don't know who I am or what I'm doing. And maybe that's the point. Maybe being lost is part of finding yourself, because if you already knew who you were, you wouldn't need to look. You'd just be performing certainty, pretending you have it all figured out. But the truth is messier than that. The truth is you're constantly changing, constantly discovering, constantly becoming something you didn't know you could be. So maybe the question isn't, who am I? Maybe the question is, who am I becoming? And maybe the answer changes every day. And maybe that's okay. Maybe life doesn't begin when you find yourself. Maybe it begins when you stop looking for a fixed answer. When you stop trying to nail yourself down into one identity, and you just let yourself be. Complex, contradictory, constantly changing, all of it. So here's what I keep coming back to. You're not lost. You're just deeper than you've been allowing yourself to be. And maybe the work isn't finding yourself. Maybe it's remembering yourself, piece by piece, shadow and light, until you're whole enough to stop searching and brave enough to just be.